The fluorescent lights of the Grand Metropole Hotel buzzed overhead as Robert Hayes watched his wife Margaret clutch her worn purse a little tighter. They'd been standing at the marble reception desk for nearly 10 minutes while the young manager, Derek Thornton, scrolled through his computer with deliberate slowness, his lip curled in barely concealed contempt. Robert could see their reflection in the polished surface behind the desk. An elderly couple in their 70s. His flannel shirt faded from decades of washing, her floral dress carefully mended at the hem. They looked exactly like what they were, farmers who'd spent 53 years working the same 100 acres of Iowa soil, their hands weathered and calloused, their faces lined by sun and struggle and loss. "As I've explained," Derek said, not bothering to look up, "we're fully booked for the weekend. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the roadside inn off the highway. I believe they have rooms available for $49 a night." He said it the way someone might suggest a landfill as a vacation destination. Margaret's fingers trembled slightly. Robert knew what this trip meant to her, why they'd driven 12 hours from their farm to Denver. Their grandson Michael was graduating from medical school tomorrow, the first person in their family to earn a doctorate, to break the cycle of backbreaking labor that had defined generations of Hayes men and women. Michael had begged them to stay somewhere nice, had even offered to pay, but Robert's pride wouldn't allow it. They'd saved for 2 years for this trip, setting aside $20 here and there from selling eggs and vegetables at the farmer's market. "Son," Robert said quietly, "I called 3 weeks ago and made a reservation. Confirmation number 847932. I have it written down right here." He slid a piece of notebook paper across the desk, the numbers carefully printed in Margaret's neat handwriting. Derek finally looked up, his eyes scanning them from head to toe. "A reservation doesn't guarantee anything if you can't provide a valid credit card. Our policy requires a card on file for incidentals. Do you have a credit card, Mr. He glanced at his screen. "Hayes?" "I have a debit card from our bank in Cedar Falls. I called ahead and made sure it would work. Your colleague, I believe her name was Jennifer, said it would be fine." "Jennifer is no longer with us," Derek said with a thin smile. "And I'm afraid our policy has changed. We now require a major credit card with a minimum $10,000 limit, for security purposes." The way he said it made clear he doubted they had $10 between them, let alone 10,000. A younger couple approached the desk, the man in a tailored suit, the woman dripping with jewelry. Derek's entire demeanor transformed. "Welcome to the Grand Metropole. How may I assist you today?" His voice was suddenly warm, obsequious. Robert felt Margaret's hand slip into his. After 53 years, he knew every one of her gestures. This one meant, "Let's just go. It's not worth the fight." They'd spent a lifetime swallowing small humiliations, being overlooked and underestimated because of their worn clothes and calloused hands. But something in Robert had shifted during the long drive to Denver. Maybe it was passing the farm that would have been Michael's inheritance if he'd chosen that life, seeing the fields Robert had poured his soul into for decades. Maybe it was remembering all the times he'd bitten his tongue when suppliers or bankers or seed company representatives had treated him like dirt on their shoes. Maybe it was the thought of missing his grandson's triumph because some kid in a cheap suit had decided they weren't good enough. "Before we leave," Robert said, his voice still quiet but carrying a different weight now, "I'd like to speak with the owner of this establishment." Derek laughed. Actually laughed. "Mr. Hayes, the owner of the Grand Metropole Hotels, is Marcus Chandler. He owns 47 luxury hotels across North America. I assure you, he doesn't take calls from—" He caught himself, but they all knew what he'd almost said. "From people like us," Robert finished for him. "That's what you meant, isn't it, son?" "I simply meant that Mr. Chandler is a very busy man." Robert nodded slowly. Then he reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a faded photograph, setting it on the marble counter. It showed 2 young men, barely 20 years old, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera. Both wore army uniforms covered in mud. One of them was a much younger Robert Hayes. The other was unmistakably Marcus Chandler. Same sharp jaw, same intense eyes, just 50 years younger. "Vietnam," Robert said simply. "1971. Marcus and I served together in the same platoon." We spent 13 months in hell watching boys younger than us die in rice paddies. One night our unit got ambushed outside Da Nang. Marcus took shrapnel in his leg trying to pull our lieutenant to safety. Would have died if I hadn't carried him 3 miles through the jungle to the medic station. Took us 6 hours. He was unconscious most of it, bleeding out on my back. Derek's face had gone pale. I didn't... After the war, Marcus came from money. His family owned a couple of hotels back then. Me, I went back to the farm. We kept in touch for a while, Christmas cards, the occasional letter. Then life got busy. He was building his empire, and I was just trying to keep my family fed. Haven't spoken to him in maybe 20 years. Robert picked up the photograph, looked at it for a long moment. But I remember the last thing he said to me before I left for Iowa and he went back to Boston. He said, "Bobby." He's the only person who ever called me Bobby. You ever need anything at all, you call me. I owe you my life. Margaret squeezed his hand again, this time in surprise. In 53 years of marriage, Robert had rarely spoken about the war, and she'd never heard this story. I never called, Robert continued. Never wanted to. Didn't save his life so I could collect a debt. I did it because that's what you do when someone's in trouble. You help them. Doesn't matter if they're rich or poor. Doesn't matter if they can pay you back. You help because it's right. He looked directly at Derek now. But I'm thinking maybe I should call Marcus now. Not for me. I'll go sleep in my truck if I have to. But I'm thinking he might want to know how his employees treat people. How they judge them by their clothes instead of their character. Robert pulled out an old flip phone, the kind that made Derek's eyes widen in disbelief that such technology still existed, and scrolled through his contacts. There it was, Marcus Chandler, a Boston number entered so many years ago that Robert couldn't even remember adding it. Wait, Derek said quickly. Please, Mr. Hayes, there's no need to. Let me check our system again. Perhaps there was an error. His fingers flew across the keyboard, sweat beading on his forehead. No, Robert said, still calm. I don't think there was an error, son. I think you saw 2 old farmers and decided we weren't worth your time. Decided we couldn't possibly afford to stay in your fancy hotel. Maybe you're right. But let me tell you something I learned a long time ago. Bleeding in a jungle on the other side of the world. You never really know who someone is just by looking at them. The richest man I ever met wore the same uniform I did, covered in the same mud, scared of the same bullets. He pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice. Robert? Robert Hayes? The voice on the other end was older, rougher, but unmistakably Marcus Chandler. Good Lord, I haven't heard from you in, it must be 20 years. How are you, Bobby? How's Margaret? I'm fine, Marcus. Margaret's here with me, actually. We're standing in the lobby of one of your hotels, the Grand Metropole in Denver. Our grandson's graduating medical school tomorrow. That's wonderful. Congratulations. Which room are you in? I'll have them send up champagne. That's the thing, Marcus. We don't have a room. Your manager here, Derek Thornton, seems to think we're not the right sort of guests for your hotel. The silence on the other end of the line lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had changed completely. Put him on the phone. Robert handed the phone to Derek, who looked like he might be sick. Mr. Chandler, I can explain. Whatever Marcus said made Derek's face go from pale to gray. The call lasted less than a minute. When Derek handed the phone back to Robert, his hand was shaking. Bobby, Marcus said, his voice warm again. I've just sent an email to the general manager. You and Margaret are being moved to the presidential suite for the duration of your stay. No charge, and I'm flying to Denver tonight. I want to meet this grandson of yours, and I haven't seen you in far too long. We have 50 years to catch up on. Marcus, that's not necessary. You carried me through the jungle for 6 hours while I bled all over you. I think I can manage a hotel room and a plane ticket. Besides, I want to. I've spent the last 30 years building hotels, making money. But you know what I've missed? The things that actually matter. Friends. Real people. The guy who saved my life and never asked for anything in return. Marcus's voice cracked slightly. I'm sorry, Bobby. Sorry that this happened. Sorry I let my business get so big that I lost sight of the values we fought for. After the call ended, things moved quickly. The general manager appeared, apologizing profusely. Derek disappeared into a back office and didn't return. A bellhop collected their single battered suitcase and led them to an elevator. The presidential suite took up the entire top floor. Margaret walked through the rooms with tears streaming down her face, not because of the luxury, but because of what it represented. Recognition, respect, the acknowledgement that they mattered. That night, Marcus Chandler arrived at the hotel and met them in their suite. He was older, grayer, moving with the stiffness of someone who'd taken shrapnel and carried it in his bones for 50 years. But when he saw Robert, his eyes lit up exactly the way they had in that faded photograph. They embraced like the brothers they'd been in that jungle half a century ago. Marcus greeted Margaret with genuine warmth, asking about their farm, their family, their life. He listened, really listened in a way that made clear he wasn't just being polite. He cared. The next day, Marcus sat with them at Michael's graduation. When their grandson crossed the stage to receive his diploma, Marcus stood and applauded as loudly as they did. Afterward, he offered Michael a full scholarship to study healthcare administration, with the goal of opening rural medical clinics in underserved farming communities. "Your grandparents taught me something I'd forgotten," Marcus told Michael. "That true wealth isn't in bank accounts or properties. It's in character, in kindness, in the courage to do what's right even when no one's watching." As for Derek Thornton, he was terminated that evening. But Marcus did something unexpected. He didn't just fire him. He sat him down and explained exactly why his behavior was unacceptable, why judging people by their appearance rather than their character was not only morally wrong but practically foolish. Then he offered Derek a choice: leave quietly or spend 6 months working in hotels in rural communities, learning to see the dignity in every person who walked through the door. Derek chose the latter. Sometimes people need more than punishment. They need education. Robert and Margaret returned to their farm in Iowa, but something had changed. Marcus began visiting regularly, escaping the corporate world to spend weekends in the same fields where Robert had poured his life. He'd sit on the porch in the evenings, drinking iced tea and talking about everything and nothing. "I built 47 hotels," Marcus said one evening, watching the sun set over the cornfields. "Made more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But you know when I felt richest? Sitting in that helicopter getting evacuated from Da Nang, knowing I was alive because someone cared enough to carry me 3 miles through hell. That's wealth, Bobby. Everything else is just numbers." Robert nodded, holding Margaret's hand the way he had for 53 years. "Some folks spend their whole lives collecting things," he said. "Better to collect moments. Better to be the kind of person others want to remember." The Grand Metropole in Denver underwent a transformation after that night. Marcus instituted new training programs focused on dignity and respect. He personally reviewed complaints about staff treating guests poorly. And in the lobby, he hung a photograph. 2 young soldiers in muddy uniforms, arms around each other, grinning despite the horror surrounding them. Beneath it, a simple plaque: "Judge not by appearances, but by character. Every person who enters here deserves respect." Years later, when Robert Hayes passed away quietly in his sleep at 87, Marcus Chandler stood at his funeral in the same small Iowa church where Robert and Margaret had married more than 6 decades earlier. He told the congregation about a night in Vietnam, about 6 hours being carried through the jungle, about a debt that could never truly be repaid. "Robert never thought he was a hero," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "He was just a farmer," he'd say. "Just a regular guy. But he showed me what real greatness looks like. It's not in boardrooms or balance sheets. It's in how you treat people when you have nothing to gain. It's in carrying someone through the darkness because it's the right thing to do." Margaret, 90 years old and still sharp as ever, touched Marcus's hand after the service. "He was proud of you," she said. "Not because of your hotels or your money, because you remembered who you were, because you stayed human." That simple statement, "because you stayed human," became the unofficial motto of the Chandler Hotel Group. It was what Robert Hayes had taught Marcus in that jungle 50 years ago, and what Marcus had almost forgotten in the pursuit of success: that money and power mean nothing if you lose your humanity in gaining them. The old farmer in his faded flannel shirt had been worth more than every dollar in Marcus Chandler's empire. And in the end, both men knew it.